The purpose of this video is to help you complete the Learning Agreement for Erasmus Traineeships. The Learning Agreement is a very important document, and it's a required document for all students who are going abroad on an Erasmus traineeship. It's crucial for the recognition of your traineeship abroad, and it's an implicit part of your Erasmus contract or grant agreement. On a practical level, it helps to make sure that you're clear about what you're going to be doing or learning while you're at your host organization. As such, it's designed to protect you and also ensure that you have a meaningful learning experience. This very important document will outline the conditions of your traineeship, the skills and competences you will acquire, how you will be assessed, and how you will gain recognition from NUI Galway once the traineeship is completed successfully. The various sections of this document will require input from you, from your departmental coordinator at NUI Galway, and from your supervisor at your host organization. So in order to fully complete this document, you will have to work with your NUI Galway coordinator and with your supervisor abroad. This document should be typed, not completed by hand, and working with an electronic copy will make editing easy and allow you to expand the sections to include as much information as necessary. You can download a Word version of this document from our NUI Galway Erasmus website. The first thing you should do is insert your name in the header section at the top right of the Learning Agreement so that it automatically follows through on all the subsequent pages. Then make sure to fill in the academic year. This is the academic year in which you will be going abroad for your traineeship. Fill in your surname and first name, along with your email address and your field of study. By field of study, we're asking for the program of study in which you are registered at NUI Galway. Please make sure that the email address you enter is your NUI Galway email address and not an alternative address like Gmail or Hotmail. You'll see that the name and email of the institutional Erasmus coordinator has been pre-filled, but you'll need to fill in the name and email address of your NUI Galway subject coordinator. Now this is either your departmental Erasmus coordinator or your NUI Galway placement officer, whoever will be signing off on your learning agreement on the very last page as the responsible person in the sending institution. The sending institution is NUI Galway. The next section is about the receiving organization. This is the host organization where you'll be working abroad during the course of your traineeship. You'll be asked to fill in the name and address of your host organization. You'll also be asked to enter the economic sector and size of your host organization. For both of these, please look at the endnotes on the very last page of the Learning Agreement document. For the economic sector, please look at endnote number 4, where it directs you to an EU website and asks you to choose from a drop-down list of sector codes listed on that website. Choose the sector code that best matches your host organization. In our example here, Brode will be working at EY Luxembourg, so he's chosen K64 or K64 for that particular section under the heading of Financial and Insurance Activities. For size of organization, please look at endnote number 5, where you're given a choice of 3 options. So the size of the host organization could be 1 to 50 employees, 51 to 500 employees, or more than 500 employees. Please choose the option that best describes your host organization. You're also asked to fill in the name and email address of your contact person at your host organization and the name and email address of the person who will be your mentor or supervisor at your host organization. The contact person and the mentor should ideally be 2 different individuals, and endnotes number 6 and 7 should help you understand the difference between these 2 people. Please also double check and make sure you haven't made a typo in either the spelling of their names or their email addresses. If the host organization is an overseas branch of an Irish company, you must give the branch address overseas and the contact name of the person at that branch address. No Republic of Ireland-based addresses or contact persons should appear on the learning agreement in relation to your host organization. On pages 1 to 2 of the learning agreement, you'll be asked to provide details about your traineeship program, the skills you'll learn, and your monitoring and evaluation plans. No part of this section should be left blank. And if this section is not completed properly and in detail, you will be asked to redo it. You should work with your NUI Galway supervisor and your host organization to make sure that you fill in this section in a way that's detailed, comprehensive, and in keeping with what your NUI Galway department expects of you. Please make sure that the left and right margins of the individual sections are all set to 0 so that the text does not disappear at the sides. Enter the start and end dates of your traineeship. Your start date is the day that you will start working at your host organization, not your date of travel. Your end date is your last day of employment, not the day you return back to Ireland. Please double check these dates and make sure they're correct. If your traineeship spans 2 calendar years, please double check that you've entered the correct year for both your start date and your end date. Enter the number of hours you expect to work each week and also your job title or the title of the project that you're being assigned. Make sure there's plenty of information under the detailed program of the traineeship. It's intended that you expand this section to show as much information as possible. Under the detailed program of the traineeship, you should give a description of your expected daily activities. So what exactly will you be doing day to day at your host organization? And you can agree on this with your employer. Include anything the employer can tell you about your tasks, duties, working arrangements, responsibilities, methods of working. Please include as much information as possible. If you've moved on to page 2, please remember to check that your name is entered at the top right corner. The 3 sections at the top of this page here can also be expanded to show as much information as possible. In the section titled Knowledge and Competences to be Acquired, please describe the skills, professional experience, or expertise that you will gain in completing your traineeship. The monitoring plan relates to how your progress will be monitored at your host organization. For example, will you have regular meetings with your supervisor to discuss how you're getting on, how you're meeting objectives, whether there are any challenges? You must make it clear that you'll be getting some kind of guidance and feedback on a regular basis, and you'll not just be left to your own devices. The evaluation plan relates to how your performance will be assessed at your host organization and also how you'll be assessed by NUI Galway. Who will evaluate your traineeship and how? Or how will your traineeship be evaluated in the context of your degree? For example, will you have to write a report at the end of your traineeship? And if so, what does that report entail? How will NUI Galway determine that you've earned your credits for your traineeship? For the section titled Language Competence of the Trainee, please enter the main workplace language at your host organization, or the language that you would be expected to use every day during the course of your traineeship. Then, please tick the box corresponding to the level of language competence that you have in that language. For example, if the main workplace language at your host organization is English, then you might check the native speaker box. If you're not a native speaker in the main workplace language at your host organization, see EndNote number 8 for a link to a web page outlining the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, and then choose the level of language that best describes your ability in that language. The next section of your learning agreement is to be filled out by the responsible person at your sending institution. Your sending institution is NUI Galway, and the person who will fill out this section is your departmental Erasmus coordinator or your NUI Galway placement officer. This is the same person who is listed as your NUI Galway subject coordinator on page 1 of your learning agreement, and the same person who will sign off on your learning agreement on the last page. This section must be completed in full with no sections deleted. You must be receiving credits for your traineeship, so please double check that the amount of credits written in this section is correct. If you have to complete a final report at the end of your traineeship, please make sure that the final report box is ticked. All other relevant boxes must be ticked as well. The next section of the learning agreement is to be filled out by the responsible person at your receiving institution. The receiving institution is the host organization at which you'll be working during the course of your traineeship. If you've moved on to another page at this point, please again remember to check that your name is entered at the top right corner of the document. This section must be completed in full, with no sections deleted, and all relevant boxes should be ticked either yes or no. At the very bottom of the section, the document asks when we can expect to receive your traineeship certificate. The traineeship certificate is another extremely important document, and it's the official confirmation from your host organization that the traineeship was completed satisfactorily, as agreed upon in this learning agreement. The traineeship certificate will be completed by your host organization, but not until the very end of your traineeship. So it's important to make sure that a date is entered here, where the document asks when we can expect to receive your traineeship certificate from your host organization. This date must be no later than 5 weeks after your traineeship end date. In our example here, Broad is finishing his traineeship on the 5th of April 2022. So the date entered here is 30th of April 2022. The next section is where you will enter the contact details of the responsible person in your sending institution and the responsible person at your receiving institution. These are the same people whose names you entered on page 1 of your learning agreement. Please enter the names, functions, phone numbers, and email addresses for the responsible person in your sending institution and at your receiving institution. Please double check that the information entered here is correct. The last section is the commitment of the 3 parties, and this is where you, your NUI Galway coordinator, and the responsible person at your host organization will sign and date the learning agreement. It's very important that all 3 signatures are dated before the start date of your traineeship. So in our example here, Broad is starting his traineeship on 5th of October 2021. So all 3 signatures here are dated before that start date. I hope this presentation was clear, and I hope it helps you in completing your Erasmus Learning Agreement. If you have any questions at all, please send us an email at outgoingerasmus@nuigalway.ie. I've also included a link here to our NUI Galway Erasmus webpage for outgoing traineeships, along with a link to our handbook for Erasmus traineeships. Please take the time to have a careful read through both of these. Wishing you all the best for a successful and productive Erasmus traineeship.